will pay for the increased defense need in Europe?
It is rather the change in the international order.
So in a sense, the debt indirectly is used to keep up social spending.
But the question is, can we really create growth?
Good morning. It's an honor to have three distinguished economists from Germany this morning with me. Allow me to introduce each of them first. Dr. Lars Ferd, a leading expert in fiscal policy and advisor to the German government. Dr. Volker Wederland, a renowned scholar in economics and monetary economics. And Dr. Ansgar Tiedemeyer, an experienced expert in financial and public affairs. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
The global economy is facing a lot of challenges and also opportunities. Geoeconomic, geopolitical concerns, rising trade protectionism, coping with climate change. But of course, we also face opportunities arising from digital economy, AI development, etc. So I hope that our conversation today will help us to understand more from both Europeans and Chinese perspective. How do we see the challenges and opportunities in the global economy going forward? Let me first start with a question on German economic policy. Recently, there is a saying that Germany is now at the so-called whatever it takes fiscal moment. So the German government is taken or is considering to take significant measures. Now, my question to you, Dr. Ferd, first, how should we see this? Is this a kind of cyclical response to the economic conditions in Germany, or is this a more fundamental shift in the philosophy in the German thinking about fiscal policy? Because in the past many years, at least some people have been saying that fiscal policy in Germany has been too conservative, as actually, part of the reason for Europe not to be doing so well in the economic growth is related to German conservatism on fiscal policy. How should we see this?
Well, actually, the decisions by the German government to change the constitution and allow higher public debt for defense and also creating a special fund for infrastructure spending is mainly due to the security shock that came in the beginning of this year. In particular, when you look at Vance's speech at the Munich Security Conference, this is the main effect that we can see here. Just because the idea in the German government and also in the general public is that we need to rearm Germany quickly in the next 4 or 5 years in order to be able to be strategically autonomous from the US to a larger extent than before. It will not be a full autonomy given nuclear weapons or something like this. This is not seriously discussed in Germany to have something like this, and it's also not feasible in international terms. But putting nuclear aside, they aim at having a strong and quick rearmament and think that they need indebtedness to do this. This is the main reason why we have it. That we get the additional 500 billion special fund for infrastructure is due to the political negotiations taking place within the possibly new government. The Social Democrats wanted to have this special fund in exchange for the additional indebtedness for defense. And therefore, I would say the actual change that we observe is not so much the idea that in Germany overall, or the German general public or the political system is moving away from its concerns regarding indebtedness and inflation. It is rather the change in the international order. The old global order after the Second World War that was characterized by multilateralism, by globalization, and countries mainly looking at their economic interests, possibly moves now to a new world order that is dominated by nationalism, protectionism, and moralism to a certain extent. And this is not good news, actually, because it finally leads to a segmentation of the world economy.
Yeah, I think you mentioned, this is not actually good news. To put it another way, some people say that military spending or defense spending is kind of zero-sum game, right? It doesn't really add on the supply side, but it increases demand. So my follow-up question is that, as I understand it, Germany at this moment does not have a lot of unemployment problem, right? So it's more or less not far away from full employment in a way, if I understand it correctly. So then the question is, given this situation, and you increase defense spending, which adds to the aggregate demand, then which part of the economy have to give up? Because you're already at a kind of full utilization of resources, right? Yeah. I don't know whether Dr. Wetherland, you have something to add on this?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of research also in the United States and elsewhere about trying to understand the effects of an increase in defense spending. And typically, the main effect is, it has an immediate effect on aggregate demand and GDP. So you will see some additional growth. But indeed, it's not usually a multiplier that is greater than one. So what that means is that something has to give. The government borrows more to fund the additional defense spending by additional debt. And so they drive up interest rates. Yeah. That makes it more expensive for private companies who have investment projects. And some investment projects on the private side will not be realized because they're not profitable at the new real interest rate. And in the same way, if you think of consumption, household consumption, yes, you will have households who maybe get jobs in defense or higher wages in defense. But in general, with higher interest rates, there will be an incentive to save more. Because it's a good time when interest rates are high. And so that basically means consumption will also give. So you will see some growth, but most likely you will see relatively a reduction to some baseline path of consumption and private sector investment. That's the normal results. What could change it, as you pointed out, well, if there's a lot of unemployed workforce, or if you have some additional innovation coming out of it. And I'm not totally pessimistic. I mean, now we also have to come up with new defense, right? There's a lot of innovation in defense, and it may spill over into other areas. And right now we have quite a big challenge in some of the sectors. If you think automobiles, exports to China went down a lot. Exports to the US have compensated, but they're also going to go down with the tariffs. So I think there is room for either workforce moving from automobiles and other industrial sectors in Germany, which are under pressure, to defense, or those companies themselves can start producing for defense. So I think that's the upside.
Yeah.
Perhaps I could add a remark on this as well, if you allow. If all the possibilities for additional government debt, for additional deficits are actually used, and this is not an innocent assumption actually. If this is used, the debt to GDP ratio in Germany could raise from 63% currently to about 90% in a 10 years term. And this would mean that the interest spending is going up as well to a certain extent. The interest rates for 10-year government bonds have increased in the week of the announcement only by 40 basis points. Well, they were close even to 50 basis points and then corrected a little bit downwards. And this also triggered interest rates in the other European Union countries, signaling that Germany still is the best debtor country, the safe haven in the European Monetary Union. But of course, this meant for Italy that the Italian interest rates for 10-year government bonds came close to 4%. And this is a kind of dangerous development to a certain extent, and we don't know how it's coming out of here. I said it is not an innocent assumption to say this is overall spent, because we realized in recent times in Germany that a lot of the money that was offered for infrastructure spending, for investment, was not used in the budgets. 72 billion euros stand out and are not used. And this is just because we have many other restrictions, in particular regulatory. And also shifts from the labor force from one sector to the other is not easy, also because of structural things. Currently, much of the equipment of our army is produced tailor-made. Whereas in the automotive sector, you have much more automated production. And this needs to change as well. And the other restrictions that the regulatory ones, all those that are in the focus of the structural reforms that need to take place, indicate that without the structural reforms, the positive effects of the additional defense spending and infrastructure spending is not granted. It's not guaranteed.
Please. May I add something to what you said earlier? You said, well, the government now decides on this additional spending, defense and infrastructure with debt. But I think what one has to realize is that, for example, in the past, if you go back to the 80s, we spent about 4% of GDP on defense, but not via debt, just out of the regular income of the government, which is how it should be, because defense is a permanent thing. Right? So what happened, with the end of the Cold War, we had a peace dividend. We didn't have to necessarily we didn't have such a strong army anymore. So that peace dividend, what was it used for? It was used for social spending, social welfare, more generous pension or other social programs. And now, basically, the reason why this new coalition is going for pure debt finance for defense is so that they don't have to cut back the social spending. So in a sense, the debt indirectly is used to keep up social spending. And nevertheless realize the defense and infrastructure which is needed, and we'll see whether it works. I think actually the finance was the easy part. Actually getting it implemented.
Maybe I can add some sentences, although many things have already been said. You said Germany has a low unemployment rate, which is somehow, we are on economic growth very low at the end of the European Union, interestingly. But I think there's also a demographic factor. So we have nearly full employment, which is not really the case. But as you say, is there really room for maneuver to grow? And as my predecessor pointed out, the point is that it may mostly increase interest rates, increase inflation as we are fully unemployed. And so where should the workforce come from? And in this capacity, really this, and I think the word crowding out did not really was approached here, but the question is, can we really create growth? And is it only just a short-term fire, And therefore, I would underline what already has been mentioned, that if we don't change or start structural reforms, be it in the budget or in tax reforms, pension reforms, so reduce regulation, these are the structural reforms as we call it, then this will not matter. So I would say this kind of, let's call it for a second, industry policy in Germany, where we do much more spending, end of austerity, then it is only short term and we must do more out of it. And this is a political message, and unfortunately we see this not in the moment in the coalition negotiations, but we keep our fingers crossed that we will see positive momentum out of it.
I think you mentioned a very important point about regulation. But let us come back to that point later. But I want to first to ask a further question about you mentioned that the recent increase in interest rate, not only in German, right, German bond, but also in French, Italian long-term interest rate. So that is raising a question that will the rest of the Europe benefit from increased defense spending in Germany, right? Previously, people say, okay, Germany has been too conservative. Germany should increase fiscal spending. Now, you increase fiscal spending, but we're not seeing spillover effect in terms of spending yet. But we already see the opposite effect on the financial side. The rise in interest rate and therefore tightening of financial conditions for the rest of Europe. So this seems to be some kind of a contradiction here.
It's two sides of the coin. If
two sides of coins. So to me, it raised the question that who will pay for the increased defense need in Europe, right? Is this part of the way that for the whole Europe to pay for this? So German increase spending on defense, or maybe, I don't know, France will spend, and then the interest rate will rise across Europe, and that will have some crowding out effect on private spending, and therefore,
maybe
how should you
well, that's the outcome of the spillovers that you have in a monetary union, and you have always considered the possible spillover effects on others that a certain fiscal policy induces. So one of the arguments why I have always defended the German debt brake in its previous version was that actually Germany is somehow providing the backbone for the creditworthiness of the whole European Monetary Union. There are also smaller countries like the Netherlands. These smaller countries had solid public finances, but Germany is the only larger country, therefore the most important backbone. And now this has changed. And well, our European partners now see what they wished for when they always said, get rid of the debt brake and go into higher indebtedness. It is an indirect payment for it, but when you think about the direct payments, it is the German taxpayers who will pay for the higher indebtedness and the higher defense spending. If it is not leading to more growth, and this requires a stronger technological orientation of the defense spending, leading to innovation that could finally also be used in the private sector, for example. If this is not the case, then we don't see that additional growth will finally pay for this additional indebtedness. And therefore, it must be higher taxed at some point in time. Yeah?